People who say, well, the laws of nature, they can't be broken. How do we know what the laws of nature are? Is the question that should be asked.
If the worldview is this is only a material world and there can be no outside intervention, then yeah, you got a problem explaining the resurrection, because there is no naturalistic way that Jesus rose from the dead. It's not possible. But if we open ourselves up to the possibility that God exists and created the universe, if God exists and created the universe, this is child's play for him.
Nobody knows for sure where the disciples of Jesus hid out, trying to make sense of things after his death. One guess is that they huddled together in the neighborhood known as Mount Zion here in Jerusalem, and that this is where most of the resurrection appearances happened. But we also talk to historians who think there was no physical resurrection in Jerusalem, that all those stories were made up and written decades after the death of Jesus. They say after the crucifixion, the disciples, dispirited and defeated, simply went home, back to their lives as fishermen on the Sea of Galilee, and that instead of a physical return of Jesus, the stories in the Gospels are describing dreams or visions.
The kind of resurrection body that the early Gospels talk about, the Gospel of John, for example, where Jesus appears in a room with locked doors. Those kinds of experiences suggest not the kind of physical body that we would see today, but something that we, if we have to use our categories, would look much more like a visionary experience.
So you believe that the resurrection wasn't a body walking out of a tomb?
Well, as an historian, if I start looking at the first accounts, they actually come to us in the letters of Paul, not the Gospels, because those are the earliest texts we have.
In those texts, Paul writes in Greek that Jesus appeared to various disciples.
And the word in Greek refers to some sort of a vision. In the ancient world, if you had a dream at night, the assumption was that it was real. It was real.
Visions, whether waking or asleep, are very common cross-culturally. A very human kind of experience that one has. People on the battlefield have them in periods and times of stress.
People in times of extreme mourning and bereavement will actually see, honestly believe they see the dead person before them.
People whose hopes have been dashed in that awful a way very often come up with various items of belief.
But where do they get this idea? They were all scattered.
No,
how do they all come together and plot and come up with this far-fetched theory?
They don't all come together and plot. What happens is that there's a kind of dynamic in the community that you begin to play with possible answers.
These scholars believe that Jesus had such an impact on his followers that when they started having dreams and visions of him, they truly believed he was resurrected. In the first century, people often turned to the supernatural to explain profound experiences.
In the ancient world, you think mythically. If something is meaningful and real to you, you reach for myth. What does that mean? It means that the heavens are involved. The earth is involved. People have post-mortem visions of Jesus. They interpret those visions in terms of resurrection.
You think it's possible that as a group they managed to convince themselves that maybe they had seen Jesus?
See, I find that very difficult to believe. I cannot imagine they're all sitting there in despair and they say to one another, why don't we think happy thoughts and imagine that he has risen from the dead? And then we go out and stick our necks out.
No, I would say that I don't believe that kind of power, and that's what it was, just enormous amount of power, could have come out of nothing.
Shelby Spong believes there was a resurrection, but he doesn't believe it was physical. He, like many other believers, thinks it was a spiritual event.
You know, I think it's real. I think it took place in Galilee. I think Peter stood in the center of it. I think it has something to do with the breaking of bread. He was made known to us in the breaking of the bread. I don't know exactly what that is, but it is clear to me that there was something that opened their eyes to see a dimension of reality that I believe is beyond the boundaries of normal.
The people who believe the resurrection was spiritual have different ideas about what that means, but they all say it defies physical description.
The Christians believe that Jesus rose from the dead into a new form of existence. If they had digital cameras in those days and they tried to take a photo of Jesus, so, get over there with Peter, would you stand with Mary Magdalene? This would make a great shot. I mean, no one will ever believe this. You take a photo of that scene and you'd get Peter and Mary Magdalene, but not Jesus. Now, does that mean that the resurrection is not real? No.
When the Bible talks about body, it really means the person. It's really Jesus, but he is not in what we would call a physical body, something that could be measured, you put clothes on, go back to work, and so forth.
So all this focus on did the body actually rise out of the tomb and walk out and talk to Mary is
a distraction.